You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Well, welcome on into Toronto Sports Rush. It is McGuire Mondays. It is the day after the Super Bowl. We were just discussing how disappointing we felt the Super Bowl was, but we aren't disappointed in the fact that, Pierre, you were very spot on with the Leafs in their 4-game road trip. You said that 6 out of 8 points would be a success for them. They got 6 out of 8 points. Overall, how would you rank that 4-game road trip, even though, you know, they ended on a bit of a low note with the loss to Vancouver?
Yeah, first of all, Vancouver's playing really solid defensively, and you could see that the one goal that was allowed, even though Thatcher Demko didn't finish the game and they had to bring in Kevin Lankinen. And I still thought there were a lot of positives in that game for Toronto. I think about the Lankinen save late in the game on Auston Matthews. If that puck goes in, then maybe it's a different story. I thought the game in Edmonton wasn't their best. They were bailed out by their goaltender, Joseph Woll. I thought they played a really good game in Calgary, really solid game. And I thought in Seattle they were a very solid team. So 3 of the 4 games, I'd say, okay, good job. And I say goaltenders still matter. So it's really a positive one. I was happy they went out on the road. They had some bonding time together. They got guys back in the lineup like Nyes, obviously, like Tavares. I think that makes a difference, Julie. So by and large, I'm kind of excited for the Leafs going into this break. And the fact they only have 4 players playing in this is probably good news, not bad news.
Right. That is a very fair point. And there's so many different sort of pros and cons coming out of this into the break that they have. And I guess what kind of grade would you give the Leafs at this point of the season? We know that there's still trade deadline coming up, which is March 7th. We expect them to probably make some moves, and they're in a position to be doing that imminently, we imagine. But, you know, sort of overall, what do you like, and what do you think is not good?
Well, first of all, I like the attention to detail defensively. They're really trying to work and get better at that, Julie, so that's a positive for them. I think the goaltending depth has really been a positive for them, whether it's Dennis Hildeby, whether it's Anthony Stolarz, whether it's Joseph Woll. I think they've all really done a good job for them. I like the physicality of the team, especially in the forecheck. That's something that's really important in the playoffs. I like the quick strike offensive capability of the team, whether it's Auston Matthews, whether it's Mitchell Marner, whether it's Willie Nylander, whether it's John Tavares, Matthew Nyes, and Bobby McMahon, 17 goals. I don't think anybody thought that when he was coming out of Colgate University as an undrafted player going to play on the Rock in Newfoundland, that he'd be a 17-goal scorer and probably going to be a 25 to 30-goal scorer this year. It's amazing. So there's a lot to like about the Leafs. What I'm worried about, and I do this exercise every morning when I wake up, and I know you're going to say to me, McGuire, you're crazy. Maybe I am. But I always look at goal differential. When I look at the standings, the first thing I look at every morning is goal differential. This is today going into the break. Florida Panthers are plus 27. Toronto's plus 13. Tampa Bay's plus 44. Okay, that's in the Atlantic. On the other side, in the Metro, Washington's plus 56, Carolina's plus 30, New Jersey's plus 33. So if you look at the top 6 teams now in the Eastern Conference, Toronto by far is way behind. So that's going to have to pick up. So how do they do that? They start scoring more 5-on-5, and they start defending a little bit better, even though I think they've defended pretty well. So to do that, they've got to get everybody healthy and being on the same page. Here's another thing that I like is a special teams quotient, Julie. Special teams quotient is the addition of the penalty kill and the power play percentage. So right now, the Leafs are at 103.1. If you're going to win the cup or compete for the cup, and it's been this way probably since 1995, you got to be at 105 or higher on your special teams quotient. The Leafs are at 103.1. So they're getting close to the level you have to be at to be able to compete at a Stanley Cup level. So there's some things I really like. There's some things that need to be a little bit fine-tuned.
Well, I don't think you're crazy for doing that. I think every morning is a commitment because a lot of people can't do anything every single day. But I think you're the second analyst that I've talked to, like just even outside of this, that has talked about goal differentials. So I find that fascinating. I hadn't really thought about that so much as such a specific indicator of I guess, success. And it makes sense. Like, obviously, the more goals you score, the better you're going to do. You're likely going to win games. But why, in particular, is that something that we should be, as hockey fans, really focusing on?
Because it shows your offensive capabilities, and it shows if you're cheating the game to get that offense. So let's just say you're a minus goal differential, and there are two teams that are minus goal differentials right now that are playoff teams. One's in the East, one's in the West. They're cheating to get offense, and so they're not as good defensively. So that brings your number down, and usually you're a minus because of that. So I think it shows you a balance in your game. It shows you how well you compete night to night. To me, like, I'll give you an example. I watched Tampa Bay play yesterday against Montreal at the afternoon game. And Tampa started the game relatively well, but they didn't play as well as they needed to play, even though they won the game. But it would explain, offensively, they're really capable, but they have lapses in their game, and that's why they're plus 44, yeah, but they should probably be around plus 50. But because there's so much swing in their game, there's got to be some fixing going on with how they play defensively.
Right. Okay, so on that note of offensive capability, we've seen kind of Auston Matthews be a bit quiet recently, hasn't scored in 6 games. What do you think maybe is limiting him right now?
People are paying attention to him. I also think, when Johnny Tavares wasn't in the lineup, and he's obviously back now, people were really loading up on him. And that opened up some opportunity, whether it's for Mitchell Marner, whether it was for Willie. And Willie Nylander has had an amazing run. He deserves a lot of credit. Obviously, Bobby McMahon, we talked about before, and Matthew Nyes, before he got hurt, Matthew Nyes was playing great. And a big reason why he's playing great is getting a lot of help from Mitchell Marner and Auston. I think Auston will be back and he'll be ripping it up. I think if you were to ask him, what's the one thing you'd like to see higher? His goals, because he's a goal scorer and he's an amazing goal scorer. So I just think with the injuries that the Leafs have had, people have been loading up on him, Julie, and that's been part of the problem for him.
Right. You can see that. And then someone else that's been garnering a lot of attention, that has been getting top 6 opportunities and a lot of offensive zone time is Max Domi, but not necessarily really kind of fitting in. What do you think maybe is his biggest issue to being able to connect and flourish on this team right now?
I think they're trying to create a role for Max, and I think it's more about being a 200-foot player rather than be from the red line in offensive type player. And so I'll give you an example. A lot of people were kind of going after him after the Calgary game, but I watched that game as a coach in the NHL rather than a fan. And I really liked what he did. His forecheck game was great. He forced a ton of turnovers. I thought he was really good in his own zone. I thought he managed the puck really well. I thought he put the puck in perfect places for his teammates, whether it was Matthew Nyes, whether it was Auston Matthews. So I saw a lot of good things. Even though it didn't translate to points, Julie, he's still getting stuff done. So I think the role that's been created for him is a little different than maybe some people want it to be. People are always looking at points rather than looking at what he's doing to help the team. So I think Max still has a role to play in this team, whether it's as a depth player or a guy that can stabilize games with his speed and his tenacity. But I'm more bullish on Max than negative, and I know a lot of people are down on him because of the lack of points, but I think he's doing a lot more than people are recognizing.
Right, yeah. So you think that most of sort of the talking heads or podcasts or fans or whatever are maybe just not necessarily seeing the nuances of where he can be sick or where he is successful, or are you just maybe the one person that's really, really liking Max Domi's play?
I don't think it's just me. I think it's Craig Berube. Craig Berube's had him playing with Auston Matthews and Matthew Nyes. There's a reason why he has him there, and they're an important line for the team. So, and you look at it, they go on the road. They win 3 out of 4 on the road, and that game in Vancouver was tight. And I'm going to give Vancouver credit. They're playing a much different style since they traded JT Miller away. They're really stout defensively. They're a hard team to play against now. Which is good for them, bad for the teams that have to play against them. But I think Max is doing a little bit more. I think coaches, and this is not a knock on the pundits or the podcasters or the fans, coaches see things differently when they're trying to win games. It's not just, let's get 6 goals in a game and only give up 4 and we win. Coaches don't see it that way. And so I think max helps you win the race to 3 and maybe win a game 3-1 or 3-2 rather than 6-4. And coaches know you can win a lot more games 3-2 than you can 6-4.
Right. And that those are games that are more likely to happen, especially down the stretch and in the playoffs when you're really needing guys. I mean, he came to life in the playoffs last year, which was like huge for them. So you know that he has that ability to do so. And we saw a guy come to life on this road trip, Morgan Riely, who has a 4-game point streak and had been under a lot of criticism this year. People wondering, is something going on? Like, is this season just kind of a mulligan? But he was able to be the only goal scorer in the Vancouver game. But, he set up Bobby McMahon on a great goal on the power play, one of those assists that he had. So I guess what's clicking for Morgan right now that maybe potentially wasn't before?
Getting an opportunity to play because of injury to Mitchell Marner, getting a chance to run the power play. I think that was one of the things that really happened. I think another thing, and I haven't heard about this, I only read about it, so congratulations to the reporters that are following the team. He had a heart-to-heart with Craig Berube, the head coach, and I think Craig probably told him, stop worrying about what's being written or said about you and go out there and play. Dominate offensively. You got live legs. You got a good stick. You can shoot the puck. You're a real good first passer. You can do a lot of things to help this team. Less worrying, more playing. Turn it loose. And, I had a long talk with Scotty Bowman probably, 20 years ago. And we talk almost every day. But this is one that I always remember. He was talking about Phil Housley, who he had drafted as an 18-year-old coming out of high school in Minnesota, South St. Paul High School. And he said to Phil when he got him as an 18-year-old in Buffalo, don't worry about the mistakes because I'm going to keep throwing you out there. Just go play to your strengths. Be a skater. Be a puck carrier. Be a breakout guy. Run the power play, move the puck tape to tape. And Phil took advantage of that to have a Hall of Fame career. And I think Berube probably helped, Morgan Riely a lot by telling him, just go out and play. Just go play to your strengths. And I think that helps a lot when a coach does that to a player.
Right, because I'm sure he's thinking a lot about it's the trying not to make a mistake, where then you just end up not playing at all properly, like the way that you can play and to the best of your ability. So that's great. I think that the communication and the trust can go so far, especially mentally, definitely mentally with these guys, because as we know, that's such a huge component of this game. And as we look sort of ahead to this break that they have, and you mentioned some of the guys going to Four Nations face-off. Other guys will be, I know for a fact, John Tavares is going to be training in Naples where he has a place. And so, he's going to try to keep things going. So there's this balance of trying to take advantage of the time off to rest and recover, but also you want to keep the momentum going. So what's sort of your insight into how guys that maybe aren't playing in Four Nations face off, how they would manage this?
I think cardio more than anything else. Keep their legs, keep their cardio going. A little time away from the rink's not such a bad thing. It's probably a pretty good thing for a lot of them. It's one of the things that I'm actually encouraged about for the Leaf players and the team. They'll be able to get a lot of these guys that had little nicks and bruises, and some even more serious than that who are playing through some stuff. They get a chance to go heal, and nothing heals you better than some sun and some salt water. It's an amazing elixir to help your pain and injury. But I would say most of them are probably going to work on their cardio and keeping their legs. You don't need to be in the ice at this time or on the ice at this time of the year. But no, I'm encouraged. Like Johnny's an important. You know what? I got to tell you, Julie, Johnny's a really important part of this thing. If they're going to win, he's got to stay healthy and he's got to be ready to play the way he's been playing most of this season.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I'm sure that the break will be very welcome to him, because I know sometimes some people were thinking he would be part of Team Canada potentially, and he made a very good case that he could. And we're still seeing who's going to be available and who isn't. There's lots of question marks around Sidney Crosby based on the fact he hasn't played for the Penguins over the last week or so, and whether or not I really do like that the Penguins said you get the opportunity to decide, because he's earned that, to even if he hasn't been playing for Pittsburgh, that he is can Captain Canada, like he scored the golden goal. Like I think that gives you, what is it, like free Chipotle for life type of thing. Like you get to decide what you want. He has the key to Canada, but I'm curious to see sort of his level of being able to contribute, because a guy like that doesn't want to take up a space in the lineup if he's not at least probably over 50% capable, just because he's selfless enough in that regard. But if you are some of the guys for the Leafs that are going to go play, like how much communication do the coaches have with the guys that are gone in terms of just checking in, seeing how they are, and making sure they're ready for when they come back?
Yeah, I don't think they'll have to worry about them being ready when they come back. I think the biggest thing is just to make sure they're healthy. Nothing wrong with a text every now and then, nothing wrong with just maybe a phone call. But quite frankly, I think most of the coaches will just let the players that are in that environment probably take care of themselves. I've been around those. Obviously, we haven't had tons of events like this, but I've been around a lot of the big international events over the last 25 years, and usually they're very professional situations. Guys are really looked after, and guys look after themselves, and the level of competition is obviously really high. So I don't think there'll be too much problem. I think the biggest thing, and we talk about John Tavares, I remember 2014 like it was yesterday in Sochi when he broke his leg.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a crushing blow.
Or was that
for the New York Islanders back then?
Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of Stamkos, but he wasn't there.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
That's
okay. So anyway, so you internationally you worry about those things, and anytime there's a game that involves competition with best on best, stuff can happen.
You reminded me back to when the Leafs played the Habs in the bubble, right? Or was it not the bubble? The 20, was it the bubble? Gosh, those years are just completely like erased, the early pandemic years. But remember when they played Montreal, yes. And Corey Perry, the injury for Tavares?
They got beat by Montreal, yeah.
And that was was that the first game?
I don't know if that was the first game or not.
But he got injured and he was out, and it was like...
I was in the bubble in Edmonton. I was in the bubble in Edmonton, I believe, when that happened. So.
Isn't it weird thinking back to that actually happened and existed? Because I've been thinking about Tampa and John Cooper and thinking, I interviewed him after he won his first Stanley Cup with Tampa, and it was like, no one was there, right?
No, nobody was there. You're 100% right. That was in Edmonton, and it was a really different situation. Kenny Albert and I were there from the beginning of the bubble till the end, and the only people that were there longer were the people working in the arena and the referees that made the cut till the end, and we all stayed in the same hotel. It was pretty amazing. It was 2.5 months. We lived in Edmonton for 2.5 months in the same place.
Wow, I can't even imagine just those memories and kind of thinking back to them of such a surreal time. And that was insane. But I wanted to share with you, I had interviewed Patrice Bergeron last week and asked him about the USA-Canada rivalry, and just to explain it to people that didn't know what it was like to play in it. And he just said, he remembered back to 2016 before the World Cup and said that they had an exhibition game against USA, and they just beat the living crap out of each other in it. And then they all had to say oh, wait a second, we've got a tournament to play. We can't just do this. So I love Patrice Bergeron, of all people, who's, such a mild-mannered individual, really kind of showing us how feisty and how much hatred there is between Canada and USA. And I mean, as much as I expect the guys to really not really be careful about intent, just be professionals, obviously, on the ice, I know there's going to be a lot between them, especially in that Canada-USA Saturday night in Montreal. I mean, you've seen it firsthand.
Well, what's interesting? You're right on. I've seen it, yeah, but you're absolutely right, Julie. You're not wrong to present that. Here's the thing that really kind of is interesting. This tournament happens fast.
Yeah.
You don't have any wiggle room. You make a mistake in one game, it could be the mistake that costs you the whole tournament. So you got to be really sure of what you're doing. You got to, and I was reading something today. I want to give credit where credit's due. Victor Hedman was talking about it after the game yesterday in Montreal, where he said, this is one of those short tournaments where you got to hit the ground running. Now, most of these guys, not all of them, but most of them have played World Junior. And that's one event where you have to hit the ground running. There's not a lot of wiggle room, because back in the day, if you didn't make the crossover, you weren't making it, or if you didn't get the bye, you weren't going to win the tournament. It's just that's the way it was. So most of these guys have experienced that kind of an event where you got to hit the ground running, and if you don't, chances are you won't win. The Canada-U.S. stuff definitely has a life of its own. There's no question. Just like Sweden and Finland has a life of its own. It really does. And I've been to a lot of those games too. They're pretty nasty. Just like Russia, Latvia back in the day had a lot of bad blood. I'm excited for that game between Canada and the U.S. That's on Saturday night. It's an 8:00 start. But I can't wait for the event to get going. I'm actually heading to Montreal tomorrow morning. I'm going to go to the Bean Pot tonight in Boston, and then head up and work in Montreal.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to go. I booked a flight to go next weekend for the 2 games on Saturday, the 15th. So will you be there then?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'll be in Boston getting ready for the games. Yeah, we'll be passing each other.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's we will enjoy Montreal, and we will enjoy our international hockey. But before we go, we know the Leafs are second in the Atlantic right now. So tight between Florida up top, them, Tampa, as you said, coming on. Where do you kind of see them in the bigger picture in the Atlantic, let's just say, against, sandwiched between those 2 Florida teams?
I think if they're proactive going into the trade deadline, I think the Leafs could be the best team on paper going into the second part of this. We're past the second part of the season, but after the trade deadline, that last 20 to 22 games, I could see the Leafs being the best team in the Atlantic. I really could. It depends on what they do. Biggest need, I think a third-line center. Obviously, people have been talking about that for a long time, not just me, but a lot of people have. And I still see a need for a guy that can run the power play in the back end, an elite puck-moving defenseman. Whomever that might be, that's up to them to decide. But if they ever added those 2 components, I could see the Leafs being the best team in the Atlantic. My only concern is the injury situation. It's been there all year, Julie. You've been around it. You watched it. That's got to go away. They got to get their roster in check and ready to go the rest of the way.
So what if they just got one of those 2 things? Where would you rank them?
They could still be at the top of the food chain. They just have to stay healthy. And if you were to ask me, people say, well, which would you rather have, the puck-moving defenseman or the third center? I'd probably want the puck-moving defenseman, because I think in the playoffs it's going to become really – you don't want teams being really actively forechecking your group, and then your forwards, all those skill players, having to pick pucks off the boards. If you can get one more elite puck mover and you can move the puck through the middle of the ice, and that's what's required to be a real good playoff team, you can have some success, especially against a team like Tampa and a team like Florida.
Right. And with Florida seeing them last year, that relentless forecheck that they had, the 4 lines that they had just smothering you. Even, Carolina, kind of the same thing. They're just all over you every single way. So you can see that being kind of a bit of a recipe for success in the last couple of years, is just that entire team defense and that entire relentless offensive forecheck, regardless of, who you are. So we'll see how the Leafs do and if they can stay healthy. And we will be waiting to see what kind of trades happen. As we know, trades can happen between NHL teams during the Four Nations face-off break. So, which could also make things very exciting and interesting for the guys that are either playing or they are off in Cabo somewhere, and we'll see who ends up where. Musical chairs at the end of the day. But Pierre, thank you so much for all your insight and analysis as always. And everyone, thank you so much for listening. This has been Toronto Sports Rush, McGuire Mondays. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.